Hey, welcome back to another Luddy Career Jumpstart episode. My name's Andrew Peterson. I'm one of the career advisors for the Career Services Office. And today we're joined by Dylan, a former peer advisor and a risk advisory associate now for Grant Thornton. Dylan, it's good to have you here today.
Yep, happy to be here.
We appreciate you coming back, and just to kind of get things started, could you just explain a little bit about your background and maybe kind of how you ended up in the role that you're in now?
Yep, so it's really random actually how I ended up where I am now because I majored in informatics, minored in cybersecurity, but I ended up in working for a public accounting firm doing a more business related role. And in doing that, I mostly was focusing towards like technology consulting, but I ended up meeting Grant Thornton actually at a Connect with Tech event actually that Luddy hosts. Hit it off with them, met at the career fair, and I just felt really drawn to them.
Perfect. And going into your final year and looking for full-time jobs, what was your recruiting strategy to kind of navigate that?
Yep. So I just overall just mostly perseverance. My junior year, I went to my first career fair ever, made my first resume, literally spring semester of my junior year. Was not at all prepared for that. Didn't go well. So after that, I really focused on one, marketing myself, two, just trying to just get more familiar with the whole recruiting process because it was very new to me. And I basically went in my senior year and just was going to apply to anything I could, just because at that point I was just like, I had to find something, and it ended up working out for me. So
awesome. Yeah, I know it sounds like you really found your match there. And kind of in that process, what drew you to Grant Thornton specifically?
Honestly, the people. So the recruiter at the time, she was just very welcoming, and everybody I talked to, it just felt like more like a conversation rather than a more like interview type question. They're just interview like conversation. It was very flowy, very welcoming, and I just overall felt comfortable, and that was huge for me.
Awesome. And that's such a big deal is when you start a new company that you want to find something that kind of culturally matches you. So I'm really glad that you were able to find something, and it's cool to see you kind of speak to a testament of that today. So diving a little more into your day-to-day, what does your day-to-day look like? Or maybe what types of projects might you encounter?
So day-to-day, usually it's roughly 8:30 to 5. Sometimes during like busy season, it could be 8:30 to 7:30. It depends. It just really just don't know what you're going to get, honestly. But so what I do day-to-day is mostly, so I do testing for SOC reports. A SOC report, well, SOC stands for System and Organizational Controls. And what you do for a SOC report is, say a large company, has clients, has other business lines. They will need to basically have an audit performed of their business process, and then also of their like information technology. So what we'll do is we go through and do an audit of that. It's not necessarily audit in the sense of financial statements. It's more so audit in processes.
Okay. And so you take a look at what processes they have in place and might make some recommendations there.
Yep. So it's like strategic assurance. So we'll let them know if everything is performing correctly, we'll give them that. But if something is maybe off, we might find that, present that to them, and then they'll make some changes. And then they could present that to their clients and anybody else they need to.
Very cool. So a lot of client-facing work here. How often would you say that you're interacting with clients in your role?
So mostly depends on the week. So when you first start an engagement, it's pretty heavy with what we call walkthroughs, is when we go through with the client contact and we will go through all their processes. And usually that first week of engagement is very heavy, almost 3 to 4 hours a day for the whole week. You're on a call. If it wasn't for COVID, we would do our first week at the client's location. So but after that, though, then it's just calls here and there, touch points, and kind of just updates. So
okay. And then as far as the rest of that kind of engagement cycle goes, so how long does your average engagement last, or does that kind of depend on what client you're working for or what the situation is?
Yep, it definitely depends on the client and the situation. So some reports are 12-month reports, some reports are 6-month reports. For those 12-month reports, you might see 3 weeks as like a bunch of working, and then you might see in 6 months later another 3 weeks because you do 2 different phases, like round 1, round 2. For a 6-month report, you will probably be in about 3 weeks, and a lot of it just depends on the client, to just circumstances, because with COVID coming around, there was a lot of at first there was some just hardships just with communication and having everything just fluid, just mostly fluidity. But after that comes around, then it gets much easier.
Okay, perfect. And I know you said that you were really drawn to Grant Thornton as a company. What do you enjoy most about the work or the role that you hold?
So honestly, again, it's like the people. It's everybody's very helpful. It's a big company, but it doesn't feel like a big company. Like, cause there's like very cliche to say like, big company, but it just feels like home. But like in general, you'll have partners who will talk to you on a weekly basis. You'll have people like basically your boss's boss, and then their boss, like they will still communicate with you, which is just really nice to know that they care about their people. So that's, for me, it's a huge plus, because then you get mentorship from different like hierarchy of people, and it really helps with your career.
Okay. And do you guys have kind of a formal mentorship program in place where you're getting a lot of mentoring kind of as an associate level employee? How does that work?
Yep. So as an A1, which is associate year one, you get paired with a buddy who usually is an A2, year older than you, or an S1, which is a senior associate one. So that's your buddy. You can ask him pretty much anything, just even if it's like small questions, just like when you first start, you're like, okay, how do I add this to my calendar? All this kind of stuff. But you also get paired with a coach, and your coach you meet with usually monthly, sometimes more. It's kind of just up to you at that point. But the coach is usually a manager and above, so they've been in the company for minimum 5 years, have a lot of experience, and you can pretty much go to them for anything too if you want to get advice. Is it okay for his first year associate to take some time off? All that stuff. Just at first, I didn't really think that was, but come to find out that they honestly want you to, because when you overwork yourself, it just isn't too productive after that. So it's really nice to have multiple contacts to go to.
Okay. And I think that might be helpful for our kind of new up and coming graduating classes. As a first year kind of employee, and they're looking to get their first kind of role, what advice might you have to kind of navigate, maybe not their role, but kind of being a newly started employee, or finding mentors within the company?
I would say just don't be afraid to ask like questions about anything. That's, for me, it's sometimes I feel like I'm like bugging my coach because I ask so many questions, random questions, and in general, it's helped me so much because I feel like I've developed, even though I haven't been here for a year yet, but I still have developed like a million times more than I was when I first came in, and I feel like very comfortable with things. And that's mostly the thing, is just ask questions, and just also don't be afraid if you don't know how to do something. It's like, or you're just confused about something, like don't be afraid to ask, because in general, it's better to ask and do things right the first time than just like feel kind of shy and to yourself and just like, okay, I'm just going to try this, put it out there. And then your manager's like, okay, well, this is wrong. You got to go back and do this. So in general, it's really good to ask questions, and just like remember that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, because everybody feels uncomfortable at some point, and then you get comfortable and it's a breeze after that. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and just not being afraid to ask questions. So, kind of on the converse of what do you enjoy most about the work you do, but what are some challenges that you kind of encounter in your day-to-day role?
So in general, I think first, so usually for audit, there's busy season, some rigorous hours, and like I thought, like, okay, doing 12 hours of homework for one class in some week in college was like rigorous for me. I'm just like, okay, working 50 plus hours in a week, I'm like, oh my God, I would go back to do that any day. But and then you get used to it though. It's after that first, like, that first grind where you're just like, wow, I've been working from dark to dark pretty much, because you wake up and in the winter months, you wake up and it's dark outside, you get off work and it's dark outside, and that's just how it is. And it takes some getting used to, but in general too, is just also working virtually, is that there's not much divide between work life and just your personal life. So like just with having everything in front of you, so like basically I feel like my computer is always staring at me, so there's always work that could be done. And I think probably the companies love it because there's been more productivity since quarantine, because of the fact that there's not that hour of travel to and from for some people. Though that hour is an extra 30 minutes to an hour you're going to be working. So you can be working, you don't have to be working. But I think that too is just like trying to find the divide between my work life and personal life.
Okay. And what advice might you have for someone? Because I know as a first year employee, a lot of people tend to fall in the pit trap of that they always have to be working. So kind of how do you manage that? And what advice might you have for someone starting their first role, and kind of how to manage that, hey, there's always work to be done, but
Yep.
Sometimes you've got to take some time and really balance things out.
Yep. So for me at first, I thought, I'm like, okay, well, I see people online right now. I should be online too. So like, I was working just like, I was doing probably too much. I was told at one point just because I thought I had to be, and also like I was very motivated, coming in. And then you get to a point where you realize that once you start getting kind of just like exhausted, and you're just like staring at a blank screen pretty much, even though there's so much to be looked at, and you just gotta like take a step back. And one of my managers who I worked with a lot is actually, for a while I was just like not skipping lunch, but not really taking lunch. I would just go run downstairs, get some food, bring it back with me, and keep working. But my manager kind of emphasized, he's like, it's really nice to take an hour a day, like for your lunch if you can. Obviously, if you have client calls, you can't do that. But if you can, take some time to yourself throughout the day, because it just, in general, it's refreshing for your brain. So it's just, there's a time when you'll realize that, okay, like you're a little more comfortable, and also you're not so frantic either. You don't feel like you're doing something wrong, like when you step away from work. And it's definitely, it's a struggle, just because again, you are a first year associate, you're given work and you want to prove yourself. So in general, I like to do a little extra than what's asked of me, just because it makes me feel better, and also I learn more and all that stuff. So, and also you advance faster. But in general, it's really good to focus on just mental health, just physical health, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I have to say.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you've kind of struck a good balance there. So now I want to ask a question about that. You mentioned you kind of transitioned from what you really had formal education in to when you started your role. And we see that a lot, that people might not, line up their roles exactly with what they have formal education in. So how were you able to leverage, skills from either past internships or experiences to kind of successfully make that jump into where you're at now?
Yep. So you'll find actually a lot of business-facing roles will start targeting technology majors, just because of the times, everything's advancing. And a lot of my job, so while it is more so focused towards the business, my role is more specific to doing like IT audits. So I had that in my bag, but just getting more familiar with, just just accounting language, and, looking at like balance sheets, their reconciliations and so forth. It's kind of a lot to come at you. And I felt when I came into, a lot of people who were with me coming in interned, so they had that experience. And me, I felt like coming into a role that I really had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know many people from the company. It was virtual, so it was hard for me to reach out to people and introduce myself. So I'd say for the first couple of weeks, I just didn't really talk to anybody. I just did what I had to do. But yeah, it just, in general, it's tough, but you'll learn that once you have to do something, you'll learn it quick, one. And then two is that, you're just given so many tools throughout college, and not even just not just educational tools, but also soft skills and habits. And it makes picking up on things much easier. So I think in general, again, companies like technology majors, but also it's just kind of up to you too to take the extra mile. I might have to spend a little more time doing something, but the first time I do it at least. And then after that, it becomes more of, okay, this is familiar. You kind of got to ask why a lot, not just okay, what am I doing? But why am I doing it? That's something that I ask a lot. And so I'm what and why. I ask that all the time. So to myself, actually. And that's kind of helps me get through things.
Okay. No, that's awesome. I think that's really gonna help students kind of help navigate that path. And specifically, I know you mentioned that you're all virtual, and that how have you managed that transition? It's something that we haven't encountered a lot before, and just kind of going to work in a new company in a virtual environment. How has that transition gone for you?
I'm telling you, at first it's very awkward, because if I have a question for a manager I'm working with, I've never met this manager, and do I just send them an instant message? Do I send them a formal email asking for anything? So just it's getting over that hump of just feeling like you're I feel like a robot sometimes. When I first started, I'm just okay, hi, I'm Dylan, so forth. It just feels very scripted. Obviously just scripted because I'm writing it, but yeah, just it's definitely uncomfortable at first, and it took me a few weeks, probably at least, to get actually comfortable with communicating via just Skype, or Skype for Business. That we don't use that anymore. We use Microsoft Teams, but yeah, just be able to use all the technology and just build connections to feel comfortable enough. It's really important too to even though if you are virtual, it's still important to not even just market yourself in terms of outside of the company, but market yourself within the company, and make the effort to possibly make it just schedule a meeting for you and maybe an associate or a senior associate, director, etc. Just one, because when you first turn the camera on, it's hey, I'm Dylan. It's awkward, but after a while, it just like they'll appreciate you going the extra mile, and then again, it starts to get more comfortable being on screen. So,
Okay. Kind of picking up on this theme of kind of continuing to build your network even after you've entered the company. That sounds like that's pretty important to what you do.
definitely.
Perfect. And now, focusing on more students who might be interested in different consulting roles, what skills would you recommend to them, or do you think is really important for holding those types of positions?
I'd say the biggest skill I'd say is one, communication, two, just willingness to learn, willingness to do whatever's put in front of you, and also being very flexible, because most of your work is going to be in teams, like within maybe groups of 3 to 4, maybe 2 to 3, and it's basically you being able to, one, be able to communicate, and two, just being like every day coming to work willing to learn. And that's something too, is just like you'd be surprised how far like hard work and communication goes, because anybody can get hired based off like their resume, but if you have like the personality, and if you're able to communicate, and if you're able to work hard, that goes a much longer way. Because again, if you look at somebody, and like me and somebody else, we're on a piece of paper, we might look the same with terms of like our experience, our education, etc. But being able to communicate, not even just like what's on your resume, but like who you are, is really big, especially for consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that communication just goes so far. Is there anything, like where did you gain your communication skills? Was that at IU, through Luddy classes, just kind of through different experiences?
So
where does that come from?
For me, actually, so I mean, growing up, like just in general, like I'm over like a pretty quiet person. I'm more to myself as it is, like I could say. But so I started working at Buffalo Wild Wings my sophomore year of college as like a greeter. So I had to like take people to the tables, and in doing that, I felt pretty awkward because I had to talk to a bunch of random strangers every day and whatever. And then come around junior year, they asked me if I wanted to be a server, and I was just like, ooh, I don't know, because I didn't know how I felt about just having to communicate every day, to just like me feeling awkward. But in like being a server, that's honestly one of like the most impactful like just experiences of my life, because I learned like a lot of customer service. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to be uncomfortable, and it was probably since then was when I kind of started to like kind of break out of a shell, because in general I'm probably still pretty quiet in general, but being able to communicate just became much easier for me after that.
Okay. No, and I love how we're connecting those kind of part-time jobs to real professional world impact. Like for me, it was a grocery store. I was a cashier at a grocery store for a number of years, and I think, like you said, you really gain those communication skills. So I like how we've kind of touched on that and made the connection there. All right, Dylan. So my last question for you today is, if you could give any career search related advice to current Luddy students, what would that be?
I'd say just don't be afraid of a no, just don't be afraid to go into something just because you feel like you're going to get rejected, because it's just not a good mindset to have, because that's kind of how I was at first. And, I just felt like I didn't have the confidence that was necessary. And yeah, just, it's kind of, again, just being able to step out, break out of your shell, and just, again, not being afraid of rejection, because like every experience you have is some kind of learning experience, whether it's good or bad. If it's a good experience, you'll learn, you'll be like, okay, I'm going to do that right. I did that right. I'm going to do it again. But if you do something the wrong way, or you feel like it's off in any way, you learn from that. You do something differently the next time. So just in general, just be very persistent, and just don't be afraid of rejection, because there's always going to be something for you,
Perfect. No, I think that's great advice. I just want to say thanks again for coming and participating today in the interview. I think we gained just a ton of great insight. So that's going to do it for this week's Luddy Career Jumpstart episode. So be sure to join us next week, where we dive into a new topic to help you jumpstart your career.